Hello, I'm Cheryl, 32 years old. When I was 6, I lost my mother, and for the next 8 years, my father raised me alone. At the age of 12, he mentioned that he was seeing someone. As a young girl, I wasn't particularly invested in the details, but when I turned 13, he introduced me to his girlfriend, Ashley, and shared that they were planning to marry soon. I'll admit, I felt uncomfortable at first, mostly because Ashley was only 7 years older than me, but over time, I became indifferent to it. However, our relationship was far from perfect. Ashley often tried to play the role of a mother figure, which I didn't appreciate. I voiced my concerns to my father, but he always sided with her. Frustrated by the situation, I moved out when I turned 20. Despite that, my bond with my dad remained strong, and we kept up a routine of meeting for lunch every other weekend. Initially, my father tried to bring Ashley into our meetings, but seeing my resistance, he eventually gave up. While he still spoke fondly of her, I focused on building my own life. After graduating college, I landed a job at a prestigious firm and began saving diligently. Within a few years, I was financially stable and thriving. But at 26, tragedy struck. My dad was in a freak accident and passed away. The loss was devastating. He was my only family, and I was utterly shattered. I spent nights crying and struggled to get through each day. Thankfully, I was given a week off work to mourn. Although I wasn't close to Ashley, I knew she was deeply connected to my dad. So, I made an effort to check in on her regularly. Our first meeting after his death was surprising. I didn't expect her to be in full mourning attire, but I did expect some sign of grief. I was a mess, my eyes were swollen and red, my skin blotchy from crying, but Ashley seemed completely composed. At first, I judged her for it. I had hoped we might share a mutual sense of loss, a connection through the man we both loved. But as we talked, I realized I was wrong. Ashley, despite her calm exterior, suddenly broke down in tears, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't expected. From that day on, I started visiting her more often. We had tea together, slowly getting to know each other beyond our shared connection with my dad. It felt like we were starting to build a real relationship, though I was still irritated by her attempts to take on my mother's role. I began to appreciate her as an individual. One afternoon, during an otherwise quiet conversation, Ashley suddenly started sobbing. I rushed to comfort her, and when she finally calmed down, she explained the source of her distress. The bank had informed her that she was facing foreclosure due to her financial struggles while caring for my dad, and the mortgage had now been transferred to her. I was shocked, but I knew I had to help. I offered to contribute financially, drawing from my savings. Grateful, Ashley accepted, and she acknowledged the unexpected bond we had started to form. As we worked out the details, I set some conditions. I made it clear I couldn't rent a place for her, and I couldn't pay the whole mortgage. Naturally, she said, "I'll be staying here, since the house is now mine, but I can't keep depending on you for mortgage payments. You'll need to get a job soon. Take responsibility for this place. I'll help with half the payments, but you have to find work, and eventually, you'll need to pay me back, and I trust you'll follow through on that." I couldn't help but feel for Ashley as she faced such a dramatic shift in her financial situation, going from stability to near desperation. I couldn't imagine the anxiety and fear she must have been experiencing. Fortunately, I had learned from my father the importance of being financially prepared for the unexpected, so I was in a position to help. The following week, I took the lead in contacting Ashley's bank to resolve the mortgage issue and prevent foreclosure. It turned out that Ashley hadn't made a payment in 6 months, accumulating late fees and pre-foreclosure charges that had ballooned to $140,000. I paid the amount out of my savings, which certainly left a dent in my finances, but I was glad to help. Ashley was incredibly grateful. even going so far as to host a lavish dinner to show her appreciation. It was a relief to see her genuine gratitude, especially after years of her entitlement. After that, I decided to move in with Ashley. It was an interesting experience. She turned out to be even more particular than I remembered, especially when it came to keeping the house spotless. I didn't mind accommodating her need for cleanliness in the shared spaces, but I made it clear that my room was my sanctuary, and I preferred it left alone. While we had our occasional disagreements, overall, living together was surprisingly manageable. As the weeks turned into months, and months into years, I began to notice positive changes in Ashley. What had initially seemed like a difficult situation began to evolve into a more harmonious coexistence. But there was one issue that continued to frustrate me. Ashley still hadn't found a job, despite assuring me she was actively looking. I never saw any concrete evidence of her efforts, not a single mention of a job interview or application. When I finally confronted her about it, she became defensive. Ashley, I don't mean to sound harsh, but when do you plan to get a job? It's been a year since you promised, and I need a clear timeline for how much longer I'll be covering the mortgage. I don't know when it'll happen, okay? I haven't had any interviews, and I'm not getting any responses. Ashley snapped. Have you at least considered applying for a part-time job? No way, she replied, her tone sharp. I'm trying to help you out here. I can't keep paying your mortgage. If it's too much for you, then just stop. I'll figure something else out. I can't risk being stuck without a home. It's fine, whatever. I'm sure your dad would have been thrilled to see me struggling like this. At that moment, I barely registered the jab, but using my late father as a guilt tactic bothered me deeply. Despite that, I kept paying the mortgage, though it was increasingly difficult. Ashley's behavior grew more overbearing as time went on. She began to criticize my schedule and weekend plans, which, at first, irritated me. Eventually, I stood my ground and made it clear she couldn't control my life. She'd quiet down temporarily, but her resentment lingered, leaving our communication strained for weeks. Still, I continued to support her for another year, but I knew something had to change. The realization finally hit when I noticed that Ashley made no real effort to find work. It didn't sit right with me. One day, while she was out, I decided to go through her unlocked laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 3 years, she had applied to exactly one company, and that was just after I agreed to help with the mortgage. A mix of anger and disgust washed over me. She had been taking advantage of my kindness, and it was clear she hadn't been honest with me. When she came home that night, I sat her down and told her I could no longer continue helping her. How can you do this to me? Ashley cried, her voice trembling. I've given you 3 years to figure this out. Ashley, I've tried to help you, but you've refused every piece of advice I've given, and you haven't made any effort to improve your situation. I can't keep carrying you. Well, then show me all the places you've applied to this year, she shot back. That's an invasion of my privacy, I fired back, anger building. Look, I said, trying to stay calm, I'm glad we've built a relationship over the past few years, and I'm happy I could help, but I need to start thinking about my future too. I never wanted to own a house, and I hate that I'm stuck paying for something that was never part of my plan. Ashley broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. As much as her tears affected me, my anger was still there, and I left her that night, feeling both furious and conflicted. The next day, Ashley wouldn't speak to me, but I asked her to just listen. I think you should consider filing for bankruptcy, I suggested carefully. It could buy you some time by securing an extension on your mortgage payments and give you a break from repaying it for about 6 years. Ashley was silent for a moment, then looked up at me. Can you help me with the paperwork? Despite how cold she'd been toward me, I agreed to assist. Over the next few weeks, we worked through the process together, and eventually, Ashley was granted the relief she needed. The mortgage was put on hold for 6 years. Before I left that evening, I reminded her once again, this is your chance to rebuild. You need to focus on your finances now and not waste this opportunity. She shrugged, dismissing me with a wave. I've got it under control. Just move on. Despite the emotional sting, I came to understand the importance of no longer allowing myself to be used. I made the decision to move out within the month, and it was the best choice for my well-being. Over the next few years, my financial situation began to improve. 3 years after separating from Ashley, I earned a promotion at work, which allowed me to save and invest more effectively. As time went on, my communication with Ashley dwindled. She put little effort into maintaining contact, and while I made attempts to stay in touch because of her connection to my father, her responses were always cold, telling me to mind my own business. Though it stung at first, I eventually accepted that this was her way of dealing with things. Life continued on a positive trajectory until about 6 months after Ashley's bankruptcy period ended. One day, unexpectedly, she showed up at my doorstep. I hadn't heard from her in months, so her appearance was a surprise. I quickly sensed why she was here and prepared myself to stand firm in setting boundaries. But, despite my initial resolve, I invited her in. As I looked at her, I noticed how much she had changed. Her hair was tangled. She had lost a significant amount of weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes, signs of sleepless nights and distress. Seeing her in such a state, I couldn't help but feel concerned. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice softening as I observed her struggles. Ashley sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping. She admitted to having fallen into a downward spiral since I left. She explained that she had tried to reach out to me, but claimed that every time she did, I pushed her away. The loneliness in her voice was palpable. "I know I messed up. After I left, I didn't know how to handle everything. I understand now how badly I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I never meant to push you away or make you feel like you weren't important. My behavior, it was all a reaction to how angry and lost I felt. I was so frustrated with myself, with everything. I felt abandoned, and I guess I also resented your dad for leaving me to face everything on my own. The struggle just became too much. I've been trying, Cheryl, but it's been 6 years. 6 years without a job. Depression has taken everything out of me, and I've almost drained the funds your dad left behind. My family has completely cut me off. I've tried to explain how hard it's been, but they won't listen. They don't understand." I could feel the weight of Ashley's words. My heart softened. "Ashley, I didn't realize things had gotten so bad. I hate that I keep turning you down when you're in such distress. You've already done so much for me. I promised myself I wouldn't help again. But hearing you like this, seeing a woman so clearly overwhelmed by depression, I can't help but empathize. I'm sorry, but I'll help you again." Her relief was palpable. Tears filled her eyes, and she thanked me profusely. Her gratitude almost too much to bear. As painful as it was to go back on my decision, I couldn't turn my back on someone who was clearly suffering. The next week, I found myself at the bank, trying to sort out her mortgage. It turned out Ashley hadn't made any payments in the last 6 months. I found myself wondering why she hadn't contacted the bank to adjust her payments or explore options for reducing them. But then I realized her depression must have clouded her judgment. Clarity is a luxury in those circumstances. As I reviewed the mortgage details, I saw the remaining balance, $95,000, including late fees. It was a significant amount, but I had been saving diligently over the years, and I had enough in my account to cover it. I asked Ashley if she wanted me to pay off the mortgage and allow her to repay me over time. She tearfully asked if such an arrangement was even possible. and when I confirmed it was, she promised to pay me back. I insisted she put it in writing before I moved forward with the payment. To my surprise, she convinced me to pay off the loan first, promising to formalize the agreement later. When I arrived at her house, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, and the front door was unlocked. As I stepped inside, I heard laughter coming from the living room. What I saw left me frozen. There was Ashley, sitting on the lap of another man, her arms wrapped around him, laughing as if nothing was wrong. I felt an unsettling sense of betrayal. Just a week ago, she had spoken to me about how deeply she loved my dad, how she could never get over him. She always spoke of him with such reverence, emphasizing how proud he would be of me. To see her in this situation, so soon after his passing, made me question everything. In that moment, I realized something was terribly wrong. Had I been manipulated into paying off her mortgage? It wasn't just a financial request, it felt like a setup. Ashley looked up, saw me standing there, and laughed. She turned to her new partner and said, "Darling, look, that's the girl I told you about. She's the daughter of the man from whom I got this house. I tricked her into paying it off, and now we get to live here happily ever after." I stood there, stunned, unable to process what I had just heard. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking with confusion and anger. Ashley looked at me coolly and confessed, "I could have gotten a job. I could have done something for myself. But I didn't want to. I needed you to pay for it so I could keep living here. My love for your dad, that was a lie. I used him, and I used you, too." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt utterly stunned and betrayed. The constant exhaustion I had carried for so long finally took its toll, and I knew something had to change. So, I married an older man, someone stable, financially secure. I thought he might be my refuge, someone who could offer me the security I so desperately needed. And if I'm honest, I hoped he'd live long enough to be a steady presence in my life. "It's hard to believe how long I supported you when you were at your lowest," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "How could my father have been so taken in by you? Do you even understand how much he loved you?" Ashley's expression remained indifferent, cold even. "I don't care what you think. You can say whatever you like. At the end of the day, I own this house, and that's all that matters to me. Besides, I have my boyfriend to share my life with now." Her words cut through me, but I couldn't let them affect me. I was done. In a moment of fury, I stormed out of the house, tears blurring my vision. The anger within me was overwhelming, a deep-seated desire to make her feel the pain she had caused. How could she be so heartless, so manipulative? But I couldn't let her win. I wasn't going to let Ashley walk away from this unscathed. I had a plan. As I was transferring a large sum of money to help her with the mortgage, my bank placed a one-day hold on the funds. I knew I could cancel the transaction before it went through. If Ashley had been more aware, she might have waited to play her hand. But she was too eager to show me her victory, and for that, I was grateful. Without a second thought, I contacted my bank and reversed the transfer. I blocked Ashley's number and every social media account she had. I ensured she couldn't reach me, not even a single message. I knew it would take her at least a month to realize the payment hadn't gone through. In the meantime, I packed up and moved on with my life. As much as it hurt, there was a certain satisfaction in knowing I was giving Ashley a taste of her own medicine. I hoped she would face the consequences of her actions, and I felt a grim sense of justice in denying her what she had so thoughtlessly taken from me. Not long after, I learned through mutual friends that Ashley's house had been foreclosed. She had been couch surfing, and her boyfriend had left her. To make matters worse, she had no income, no way to pay for anything. The attempts she made to smear my name were fruitless. No one believed her. In fact, many people reached out to me, checking on how I was doing. By denying her the house, I felt like I had honored my father's memory, ensuring that the home he left behind wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. This experience taught me a hard lesson: never let anyone manipulate you. No matter how close they may seem, people can be deceitful, quick to take advantage of your kindness. I've learned that some people never change, and once they've betrayed you, letting go is the only option. In the end, I'm grateful for what I've learned. I will continue to live my life, honoring my father's memory, and I'll do it without letting anyone dictate my actions again. Thank you for listening.